Welcome, hello, and hi, my creative friends. Today, we're checking out some very black, very triangular pencils. From one of the oldest pencil manufacturers in the world with a pedigree in artist grade pencils comes a pencil that there is no other word for it, it's very black. Vibrant cores, a modern look, very black barrels, and they also happen to be triangular. Today, we're looking at the Faber Castell Black Edition colored pencils. Faber Castell is one of, if not the most well-known pencil manufacturers in the world, with a range that covers everything from students right up to the professional artist grade polychromos. We've checked out the polychromos and we've taken a look at the classic series. Both these pencils are very different ranges and aimed at very different markets, but as a whole, for what they are, both ranges were very strong performing pencils and have been a real pleasure to play with. But what about the Black series? What's the go with them? What are they like and who are they for? The Black Editions have been out for a few years now, so they're not new, but I actually haven't ever had a chance to play with them before, so I'm very excited to see what they're like. Faber Castell state that they are soft cored and vibrant colors. Let's test them and find out if that's true and just how good they are. First up, let's start by taking a closer look at the pencils themselves. These are the Black Edition pencils from Faber Castell, and today we're checking out the 36 tin pack of pencils. If we jump over to the Faber Castell site, this range comes in tin sets of 36, 24 and 12, as well as cardboard offerings in sizes of 12, 24, 36, 50 and apparently 100, although that's not on their site. What is it with pencil manufacturers not keeping their sites updated? Anyway, back to our 36 tin kit. It's very striking and, like the name suggests, very black. On the front is some very vibrant pencils and a graffiti-like logo for the Black Edition. Interestingly, what you're seeing here is a tin, but it's covered in a cardboard sleeve. The sleeve has a hole cut in the front and underneath the words Black Edition are raised in the tin. It gives an overall really cool, really fun 3D appearance to the tin. Once we take that sleeve off, oh, look at that, the tin underneath is different and doesn't have these vibrant pencil prints on it. We'd better turn over our sleeve and check out the back before we remove it. The rear of this cardboard tin combo gives us a small amount of info and interestingly, looks like rather than a swatch, it's got a printout of the pencils themselves, which is great. Opening the tin up, we can see the pencils and that's super glossy, super shiny in a lid. That lid is almost a mirror and such a great design choice, contrasting with the black. The pencils are super contrasty. I feel like I'm saying super a lot here, and very, very black. If we pull one out, and there they are. They are triangular. I can't wait to see these close up in a second. But looking at the tin, it looks very deep and very secure. I think you could store your pencils in here easily. Let's go take a close up look at the pencils. The Faber Castell Black Edition are a triangular shaped pencil with rounded edges, and they are, as you can see, a very, very black pencil. They have a jet black painted barrel capped with a vibrant core surrounded by, as the name suggests, black wood. The very vibrant core is a solid wax-based core coming in at around 3.3 millimeters, with the overall length of these pencils being 175 millimeters or 6.9 inches. The Black Edition are a slimish 7.8 millimeters wide when measured from the triangle's widest point. These pencils are a bit strange in that they have minimal branding. If we look along the pencil, there's nothing until we hit the silver Faber Castell logo and the Faber Castell text. The pencils are capped with a large vibrant paint dipped swatch with a smooth end. I'm going to try very hard today to talk about these pencils and not use the word cool. They are very much so, but there's only so many ways I can say the same thing. The Black Edition are cool. The strikingly vibrant core and the swatch with the black looks really great. They actually feel quite slim when you hold them, and the black smooth paint texturally feels very well, okay, cool, in your hand. Design-wise, the idea with the triangular shape is that children and younger artists, in theory, will find these pencils easier to hold. It's much like the idea with the hexagonal shapes. That sort of user tends to hold them harder, but for shorter periods of time, so the shape doesn't cause hand fatigue. I guess we'll see how I go after our tests. Weirdly, the lack of design details, particularly a color name or color code, feels like a big oversight on these pencils. How are you supposed to grab the exact colors if there's no indication what they are other than visual is a bit of an annoyance. Even more strangely, that doesn't seem to be consistent across the different kits. I have a tin set of 24 here, and if we check them out, look at that, they do have color codes on the barrel. I'm not sure if the color code is a new thing or an old thing, as I bought both these kits at the same time, so who knows? Anyway, that's the physical side of our Black Edition pencils. It's time for us to see if they're actually any good. What we're going to do next is a series of tests, some scientific and some just my personal opinion or the vibe. First up, let's look at the saturation and vibrancy. Our first test today is, of course, the one with the scale, the saturation and vibrancy test. In this test, we look at how bright and how saturated we can make these pencils and how consistent they are across various weights. Because we don't have time to test all the pencils in these packs, I'm going to pick 4 colors from each kit, plus our dominant black and white, and we'll run the test on each of these and then assess the results. Annoyingly, as there's no pencil names or codes in our 36 pencil kit here, I'm just going to pick the mostness of each color to test them. So the colors I've chosen for the Faber Castell Black Edition are red, I guess, green, probably, blue, that one looks blue, doesn't it? Yellow, that's a yellow, white, and black. With our saturation and vibrancy test, the way we're going to be doing this is by putting down pigment from the pencils at 5 different pressures. 25 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, 200 grams, and 400 grams. So light to heavy. As the pressure builds up, hopefully the pencil should become more and more saturated as our pigment builds up. This scale is of course from my kitchen, not a lab, so the numbers might jump around a little. And for any paper people out there, I'm just using basic 120 GSM white multimedia paper for these tests. Okay, these pencils don't start out looking this bad. They look like this because I fully muffed the filming of all these tests. The actual tests were fine, but I did something silly with the camera which made it annoying to watch. As most of you are watching this video to make your own mind up about these pencils, the footage is important, so I'm going to do them all again. Anyway, let's start off today with our red at the 25 gram mark. It's actually going down quite nicely, and it's what we'd expect from the 25 gram weight. The green is very similar saturation to the red here, pretty much what you'd want from such lightweight. The blue again is in line with the saturation and vibrancy of the green and red here. The yellow, however, is very light at this 25 gram weight. The black, while it's a bit of a grey tone, is quite saturated at the 25 gram weight. Let's see what the 50 grams has in store for us now. Okay, we've had an increase in saturation and vibrancy in our red here, but not a full doubling. It's very similar to our green pencil. We've had a step up in saturation, but not a full 100%. The blue seems to be staying in line with both the red and green. That yellow is still very light. I think it's gone up in saturation, but it's hard to tell here at the 50 grams. The black has increased in saturation and vibrancy, but again, not a full doubling. Moving into our 100 grams here, we can see the red has had a nice boost in saturation and vibrancy, but again, for a doubling in pressure, it's not a doubling in saturation. The green here has also increased in saturation at the 100 grams. The blue has had a nice step up in saturation, and even that yellow is starting to become more saturated at the 100 grams. The black again is more saturated, but similar to the red, green, and blue, it's not a full doubling in saturation. At the 200 grams is where we can expect to start to see some good results. On with our red now. This is a good step up in saturation and vibrancy. We're starting to see a good intense red. Our green too has had a boost to saturation and vibrancy here at the 200 grams. So too has the blue. The yellow, while still very light, is much more saturated at the 200 grams. The black is also looking a lot more saturated at this weight. Finally, we move into the 400 gram weight. This is our heaviest weight, so I'm expecting a lot here. Our red has hit a really lovely intensity at the 400 grams. It's also started to sort of burnish back onto itself, making it quite smooth. The green is very similar to the red and has had a great increase in saturation and vibrancy. With the blue, we're seeing some nice saturation, and finally, that yellow has come to play. And we can start to finally see that lovely color coming through. The black is similarly much more intense at the 400 gram weight. However, it's almost a grey black, not a super dark black. Let's check out our white now. The 25 grams is going down quite vibrant for 25 grams. The 50 grams isn't bad, although it doesn't feel like a doubling. The 100 grams is quite vibrant, but again, likely not a full doubling. The 200 grams is a similar story to the 100 grams, vibrant, but not a doubling. And lastly, the 400 grams, quite vibrant, but not a doubling from the 200 grams. An interesting white, quite vibrant early on, but not really doubling as our pressure doubles. Well, that was pretty interesting. Overall, the Black Edition are quite saturated and very vibrant pencils. We've really had nice consistent step ups in our pencils, which is great to see, except perhaps that yellow. I feel like the yellow, because it's so light, it's a bit harder to tell by how much it's increased. This is a pretty common problem with lighter colors in most pencils, but still worth noting here. Also color-wise, that black isn't really a great black, being more of a grayish black, not as vibrant as I'd expect. The pencil feel itself was surprisingly smooth and silky to lay down. They feel quite soft, which I wasn't expecting, as in my head, I'm constantly comparing these pencils to the classic series. Comparatively, they are much softer. You can actually see this if we compare our original classic series saturation and vibrancy test with the one that we've just made here. The Black Edition are much more vibrant, and there's obviously a lot more color going down than we have on the classic swatch, particularly at the lighter end. You can also see how the Black Edition have burnished the paper much more at the higher weights, usually a sign it's a softer core. I wasn't really sold on the shape of these pencils when I first picked them up. The idea behind the triangular shape is similar to the hexagonal shape in pencils, often that it's easier for people with less dexterity to hold them. I find with the hexagonal pencils that I get hand fatigue with all the edges, but with these, they were actually really comfortable. I think it's because even though that they're triangular, that triangle shape is really pleasantly rounded, so it compensates for the angles. Lastly here, the sharpening. Obviously, because I've filmed all these tests multiple times to actually get here, I've sharpened them a lot, and you know what? They suck. The shape makes it so difficult to get a good point. I've gone through electric, mechanical, manual, and every sharpener I have, and I'm still struggling with them. I was almost tempted to resort to a knife. They are that difficult. Okay, so let's give our Faber Castell Black Editions a score here. Using our scale of A to F, with S being superb, for today's saturation and vibrancy, because they're bright and saturated and relatively consistent, I'm going to give them a B for the saturation and vibrancy test. Surprisingly saturated and surprisingly comfortable, the Black Edition sit nicely here with that B. Our next test is the single pencil gradient test. This is a pretty stock standard test for any pencil, and that's because it tells us a lot about the characteristics of that pencil, and importantly, how much control we have over it. We've been doing the last few of these on the scale and no one's complained yet, so I think we're going to keep doing that. What we're looking for here is a nice seamless gradient, while taking into account how easy it is to go from very heavy pressure to a very light pressure, and how the pencil feels while doing so. Let's go check it out. Starting with my red, as we always do, that red is coming down quite nicely. We're dropping from our heavyweight right down into our midweight. Interestingly, we drop through that mid end very quickly into what we call a lightweight with these pencils. Our green is going down extremely well as well. I'd actually say that this is a step up from the red. We have a little bit more pigment in that mid-range as we drop through to the light. Our blue isn't bad, although we have a little bit of a step from the heavyweight into the mid, and like the red, it drops quickly to the light. Our yellow with our tiny pencil is very similar to the green here, quite good, but dropping through to the mid-range quickly. There's a little bit of an inconsistency here, but I think that's just my control of the pencil. That black is going down okay. It's not super dense in color, but like the previous test, it's more of a dark gray than a black. Let's try our white on our black paper. That's quite a vibrant pencil as we come through our heavyweights into our mids. Like the black, it's not super dense, but that vibrancy holds really well through to our light end. And that was the gradient test. Overall, not a bad result, but I did struggle a little bit with it. I found the pencil quite difficult to keep at the heavyweights for this test. I think due to the pencil shape and the fact that the gradients here are wider and longer than the saturation swatches. My hand and arm are getting a bit exhausted due to the pressure. Quite interesting, as with the smaller, quicker actions like those swatches, these pencils feel great. But here, because it's a bigger laydown, they tend to fight you a bit. Also, the transition from the heavyweights into the lighter weights was just so difficult to change. That's why there's a few inconsistencies in the blue and the yellow. And speaking of that yellow, I found the yellow's core kept snapping before I started this test, and so I had to keep sharpening it over and over. The lead was coming out in massive chunks, which is why we have such a small yellow pencil now. The white wasn't bad, not super dense, but quite vibrant at the higher weights, and it gradiented okay through to the mid weights. Well, that's our gradients. Pretty decent overall, but they suffered from control issues with the biggest size of this test in comparison to our previous one. So for our gradient test, using our scale, I'm going to give them a solid B- for this test. I feel the gradients are better than a B-, but it was so difficult to do them. A B- is a good overall score here. It's time for the blending test. Blending is one of the most important things we can do when using coloured pencils. A good coloured pencil blends excellently, a bad one not so much. For this test, I'm taking our 4 primary colours, red to green and blue to yellow, and we're going to, you guessed it, blend them. We're going to be paying special attention to what happens with the points of those gradients where the colours meet. What I'm looking for is a seamless uniting of the 2 colours and how well they mix together. Let's go have a look, shall we? Starting with our red, it's not going down great. This one's even wider than the gradient test, and it's again hard to control it. We have that large step off from the highs to our mids like the gradient. This time it's just more obvious. Up we go with our green. I did this one a little bit better, but it's still not perfect. As we go up, we're getting a little bit of blending happening in the middle with a little bit of brown coming through, but it's not great overall. Down with our blue. I've tried to make this a little bit denser, but it just drops straight through the mid-range, and there must be something under the paper as there's a mysterious dark dot. Up we go with our yellow, and that's a little bit better. We're getting minimal greens coming through with our blend as the yellow crosses the blue, but it's not a super large amount. Unfortunately, these pencils didn't really blend that well. Ignoring the control issue with the stepping, the blends of these colours are there, but for the most part, it almost looks like our 4 pencil pigments are sitting on top of each other rather than blending or mixing as they should have. If we look at where the colours meet in the middle, there's a little bit of brownish purple happening in the red and green, but mostly they're staying pretty separate. It's a similar story over in the blue and yellow. There's not much happening here, but there's a little bit of green coming through. However, it's pretty much the same as the others. Our colours are sitting more on top of each other rather than blending. Overall, it's sadly not the most pleasant blending result, and again, fairly hard to control. I'm going to give the Faber Castell Black Edition a C+ for our blending test. I always wonder if I'm too hard or too soft in these marks, but the plain fact is they haven't blended well, so a C+ is a decent result for our blending test. For this test, we're going to use those blending tests that we prepared earlier and bring in our white pencil and lay it over the top of the primary colours. We really want to see here what effect, if any, the white has when blending with the other colours. How the white pencil changes and lightens the already drawn colours. Will it burnish? Will it blend? Will it do anything at all? Let's go have a look and see what happens. First up, across our red and green. As this white goes down, it's softening our primary colours, but not overly helping to blend either of them. I'm getting a strange purplish hue here on what little blend there is, but it's not massive. Now across our blue and yellow, okay, that's actually working a little bit like a blending stick and helping our blend a little bit more. We're getting a pastel colour coming through and a little bit more dominance in that blended green colour. Not a bad result for our white pencil. And that was our white test. Sometimes we get a big change in our results here and sometimes not so much. The red and green, we really haven't had anything major happen here other than the green becoming a little bit more pastel, but with the blue and yellow, it's definitely pasteled the blue and added to the blend of both colours, popping that green fractionally. Strange for a white that was so vibrant on black cardboard, it hasn't done as well as I would have thought. I guess it's the same issue that the blending test had. These pencils don't blend super well, and because the other colours are quite vibrant, unless they're a bit darker, the white just doesn't pop enough when used with them. Okay, For our white pencil, let's give the Black Edition a C+ for the white test. And that puts them right here. I would have liked to see the white do slightly better. In this test, we compared the colour the pencil puts down to the colour displayed on the barrel swatch. This test is a simple test, but it's very important because we as artists want to know the colour we're grabbing on the barrel is the colour the pencil puts down. For this test, I'm bringing in the pencil barrel and putting it next to the gradient that we created earlier. We're then just going to be comparing them by eye to see how accurate the colours are. Okay, that red's not bad. The red on the swatch is a bit darker and much richer than the pencil. The green is pretty close. I think the pencil swatch is darker than the pigment put down. The blue is the closest yet, but again, that swatch is a richer colour. The yellow's okay. The pigment put down is much lighter than the pencil swatch. And that black isn't overly black in comparison to that pencil swatch. It's much more of a charcoal than a black. So our colour accuracy here isn't too bad. They've done okay, not amazing, but not bad. I think that with a lot of pencil manufacturers, they tend to start out with a similar colour to the pencil pigment, then slightly pop the colour saturation and vibrancy to get what we have here. Swatches that are close, but overall much nicer than the pigment put down. On the positive side, however, the green and blue are actually a relatively close match with the pigment here, which is great to see. Anyway, today we're going to give Faber Castell Black Edition a B for colour accuracy. And that puts them on our scale right here. Not a bad result, but they could be better. Alrighty folks, it's time for my favourite test, the break factor. How much pressure do we need to put on these pencils before they break? To me, when you look at a break point in a pencil, it's all about consistency. Does the brand have a consistent mix in their core to get a similar snapping point every single time? This test is more than just being able to predict when the pencils will break. Consistency in the core means we have similar hardness or softness as we draw. It means we can predict what each pencil will do with pressure. Faber Castell states that these are super soft, so let's see if that's true. To make this test as consistent as possible across all the pencils we're going to review, I've set up a couple of controls. I'm going to sharpen each pencil to a point. I'm then going to dull them slightly by drawing 3 lines at pressure. Basically, this will make sure we don't have a super fine point that will break immediately. I'm then going to be using a 45-degree square to get a consistent angle of pressure. Makes sense? Let's go break some leads. Let's start off with, you guessed it, our red pencil. One day I'm going to change this just for the fun of it, but not today. I'm taking our tip off and setting up our angle. Looking at the tip here, you can actually see how much difficulty I've had sharpening these. I'll try and take that into account, but I think we may have some issues with this test caused by that. And the weight is on. 200, 300, 400, 5, 6, 7, 8, and bang! 823 grams. That's actually quite a respectable weight and not what I'd consider soft. Onto our green. 1, 2, 3, and onto our angle. The green tip looks slightly better than the red. I guess we'll find out how that affects our results. 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, and snap! 1,074 grams. That's pretty close to our red, particularly if we take into account how dodgy the sharpen was. Now for our blue. The tip is off and the angle is on and the weight has started. 200, 300, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 and bang! 978 grams. Again, relatively high, but pretty consistent with our other pencils. The yellow tip is off and we're onto the angle. I think it's a psychological thing, but the lighter the color, the weaker I assume the pencil will be. Let's see. 200, 300, 5, 6, 7, 8, and snap! 998 grams. 20 grams different than the blue. Quite impressive. Our black is up next. The black's been middling as we've done these tests, really not performed spectacularly in any test and has been fairly charcoaly as opposed to black through the whole thing. Let's see how it goes. 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and snap! 1,344 grams. A fair bit harder than the coloured pencils, but something that can be common with blacks. And onto our final pencil, the white. Whites are always a bit of a mystery. Like the blacks, they can be much harder or much softer than the rest. I'm not sure what this will be. The tip is off and the angle has started and the weight is on. 200, 300, 400, 500, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and snap! 1,687 grams. This did indeed end up being a much harder white. Well, there you go. That was the break test with really interesting results here. Faber Castell states that these are soft cores. I guess they're viewing the concept of soft cores as being something that puts down a lot of pigment with minimal effort, which for a large part with these pencils is relatively true. But realistically, these are not soft cores. If we average all our breakpoints across our pencils, we get an average breakpoint of 1,150. Now, if we take that number and put it on our big scale, it's actually one of the hardest or strongest breakpoints we've ever had, putting it second from the top. When we compare it to a traditionally soft pencil like the Prismacolor, it's 400 grams harder. Or if we compare it to the closest comparison from Faber Castell, the Classic series, it's 300 grams harder. That's a really interesting comparison, as one of the main claims from the Classic series is how hard they are, which apparently the Black series is harder. Consistency wise, they're pretty decent. The weakest pencil is the red at 823 grams, and the highest breakpoint was the white at 1,687 grams. Quite a big difference, but often the white and black are harder intentionally, which I'm assuming was the case here as the four primary colors were so similar. That brings us to our score. I think for consistency of the four primary colors, I'm going to give the Black Edition a solid B. I would have given them a much higher score, but even if we assume the harder white is intentional, that black is also an outlier. It's time for our final test. Do these pencils spark joy, or do they cause despair? This test is purely based on my personal opinion, which I formed across this whole video. Do the Faber Castell Black Edition spark joy? Let's start with the design. Yes, they look cool. They really do. A large part of the selling point for these pencils are the look of them. The black with the vibrant poppy cores make them stand out and go just wow. It's 80% of what Faber Castell talk about on the marketing side of things from their site. It feels like these pencils are marketed directly to high school students, whereas the Classic series is aimed at primary school. These black poppy designs would look great in any high school art class. Personally, I do love the look, but they feel like they've missed an important element here by not having the color name or code on the pencil. Even if you're a student or a hobbyist, you need to be able to reproduce your work, and without that identifier, it's too easy to confuse yourself what color is what. Feel-wise, on small areas, they feel great. I really enjoyed using these on our first test because of the small swatches, but once I used them for a slightly longer period, I found them quite hard to use and control. Gradienting from heavy to light is really tough, as this pencil just seems to jump everywhere, and for those longer periods, I really found that the shape caused fatigue. Control is important for a pencil, and I suspect that these cores would be better as a round barrel. I'm skeptical if shapes like this actually achieve the purpose they claim for people with dexterity issues, and would be curious to ask you out there, do you use this type of pencil because you find them easier to hold? Test-wise, they are remarkably saturated and vibrant, particularly for how hard the cores are. It astounds me how much pigment they have put down here, particularly at the lighter end. Blending though, they just don't do very well. There are no positives in our blending tests here. Even with the added white, these pencils have really struggled to mix. And because the pigment is so dense, you can't even really layer them to blend. All through this test, I've been comparing them to the Classic Edition pencils. It did cross my mind when we started that these could be the Classic Edition pencils just rebarreled in a black wooden barrel. They most definitely aren't. The core here isn't the Polychromos core, but it's something much improved from the Classic core. It's stronger but more vibrant, and there's a lot more pigment it puts down at lighter weights. They are, for what they are, a good, vibrant, low to mid-budget pencil. A 24 pack of classic red series goes for about $10 Australian or $6.70 US, where the Black Edition is $24 Australian or $16 US. And if we want to add the polychromos to that comparison, is $80 Australian or $54 US for a 24 kit. So the Black Edition is a fairly affordable and really quite a decent step up from the basic classic kit. Overall, while there are several big problems with these pencils, they are fairly perfect for the market that they're aimed at. And for that reason, I'm going to say most definitely that these pencils spark joy. For our joy factor today, I'm going to give them a B- for the Black Editions by Faber Castell. And that puts them right here on our joy factor scale. Well, that's it. All the tests are done and all that's left to do is work out our final score. How we do that is by taking all the results they have received across all of our tests and aggregating them with a final mark. So, for our final overall score for the Faber Castell Black Edition pencils is, drumroll, a B-. Nice work, Faber Castell. If we put them on our big scale, they go right in here. Finally, what we do here is we make a decision as to how we class these pencils. Are they categorized as student, hobbyist, or professional? I think throughout this testing, we've seen pretty quickly who these pencils are aimed at. Student, but high school students. Their excellent color laydown really means they'll do extremely well as coloring pencils also. So realistically, we could stick them in the hobbyist range, but I think because of those blending issues, we're going to stick with student. And that puts them right in here. You guessed it, with a number of other excellent student pencils. Well, that's it, we're done. I really hope you enjoyed looking at these absolutely beautiful and very black pencils. Do you use them? How do you find them? Do your pencils have color codes or color names on them? If I'd bought both of these kits at different times, I'd be able to tell which is the earlier version and which is the new one, but they both came from the same shelf at the same time, so maybe it's just the 24 packs that have the codes and names. Who knows? Anyway, I'm still as inconsistent as all get out with releasing these, but we do have another pencil next time, the very, very popular colored pencil from Crayola. I swear we're going to do something other than pencils one of these days, but I have a huge pile of pencils to get through, so let's just see what happens, shall we? But until then, if you want more stuff, have a little look at the links below. We have a very active Discord that you can sign up for, and if you want to come and chat and hang out with us, I'm on Twitch most days. That's it for now, everybody. Have a brilliant day. I'll talk to you all very soon. Bye!